This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you may have missed this morning. We also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 21st of April 2021, and I am Miss K.
I'm Tom.
And I am JM. In case you missed the headlines this morning, here they are. In the Daily Nation, Uhuru corners Ruto over UDA. In the Standard, in office illegally. And in the Star, CS's plot to scrap IEBC technology use in 2022 poll and other stories. So, let me tackle the Daily Nation.
Yes.
Uhuru corners Ruto over UDA. He's, we're told in the newspaper that the Jubilee Party Secretary General has annulled this purported coalition agreement between the party that PDR that had changed its name to UDA with in coalition with the Jubilee Party. And so in the context of that, I want to talk about the hubris of William Ruto. The legendary Oxford professor, Isaiah Berlin, once categorized writers by saying that the fox knows many things, but the hedgehog knows one big thing. And Professor Berlin was comparing two types of writers. Hedgehogs, who were people with a worldview consisting of one central idea, around which everything else is related, and foxes, who paid attention to the small details and saw the world as a complex place with a variety of different and sometimes even contradictory aspects. Berlin's analogy then was quickly expanded upon by others to include famous leaders of our time.
Correct.
This time, the hedgehog represented a highly driven, single-minded leader, while the fox represented someone who was cunning, cautious, and somebody who typically sees obstacles in their way. Now, with this analogy, it became apparent that the best leaders had a healthy dose of both the fox and the hedgehog. Leaders at the extreme ends of the spectrum who were either too cautious or too big picture thinking, they didn't work out very well. Now, Uhuru Kenyatta, he leans more towards the hedgehog. But he is a perfect combination of both these characters. William Ruto, on the other hand, is 1 part hedgehog and 9 parts fox. He has learned absolutely nothing from his boss and mentor, Uhuru Kenyatta, over the last 8 years. And that is why he will surely be defeated in 2022. You see, the trouble with a fox is that it focuses too much on tactics.
Correct.
The fox is typically short-sighted. Its realm of strategy is two-dimensional. If it were to play chess, the fox would only be able to see 2 moves ahead. Uhuru Kenyatta, on the other hand, he sees 8 moves ahead. And he's not even a strategist, ladies and gentlemen. He is a grand strategist, currently playing a multi-dimensional political game that combines primary and secondary thrusts.
Goodness.
So, what does the future look like for this man who is 1 part hedgehog and 9 parts fox? Foxy William Ruto, who intends to make himself president through dividing the different ethnic nations and stirring up class hatred, has gotten so caught up in the realm of tactics that he has lost sight of the long-term objective. His singular focus from 2013 should have been to win the heart of Uhuru Kenyatta. And he should have learned that from Mzee Moi, who, when he was made vice president in 1967, aimed to do only one thing: be a man after Jomo's own heart. Mzee Moi never concerned himself with the tactics of trying to become president. And that is because he knew if he won Kenyatta's trust, the presidency would be handed over to him in toto. And it was.
Absolutely. You know, guys, I have come to the conclusion that William Ruto will not be impeached and he won't resign. The man will simply fire himself. And that's because his past may just end up catching up with him. And when the time is ripe, Parliament won't show any mercy. Parliament will impeach him. And he'll have nobody to blame but himself. And we say this because Ruto still has some unfinished business in the corridors of justice.
Oh, yeah.
The first corridor of justice is ICC. Last week, we told you that Fatou Bensouda said that William Ruto is guilty of witness tampering. The question is, why did she say it then and not in 2016? And the reason is simple. She was speaking from some point of information. She was speaking from authority. You see, Ruto's alleged fixer, Paul Gisheru, was required by the ICC pre-trial chamber to submit his evidence by the 8th of April 2021. We suspect he did it. Who knows, he may even have done a plea bargain deal. And a plea bargain in this case would entail Gisheru saving himself and giving up a bigger fish.
Yeah.
The second corridor of justice thing may have nothing to do with Ruto, at least for now. But in the 65 billion shilling Kimore and Road Dam case, 2 permanent secretaries have turned state witnesses against the former cabinet secretary. If they have turned state witness, it's because they have agreed to a plea bargain. And if the cabinet secretary is the only accused, even he may snitch on the godfather of the 65 billion shilling scandal. Question is, who will the CS or former CS sacrifice? Someone in Karen is in a prisoner's dilemma, and things ain't looking so good.
Hey, okay. On snitches, I will not talk about that, but I will talk about court cases and legal dilemmas. So today, the Standard reported on an interesting turn of events.
Yes.
A few months after Maraga left office, and while the JSC is still interviewing his replacement, the judiciary has decided to revisit the executive. So the High Court declared the position of Chief Administrative Officer, CAS, that was initiated by the president in 2018 unconstitutional because of lack of public participation. Then the court also directed that a fresh parliamentary vetting be done for 10 cabinet secretaries who were reappointed by the president after his re-election in 2017. But, and here's the clincher, the judge suspended the judgment until the COVID-19 pandemic flattens out of the kindness of his heart and because, in his words, the implications of his judgment could disrupt the functions of government.
Correct.
What a confused judiciary.
I know, very, very confused. I give you one thing, then I say, okay, no, wait, just hold on. But anyway, that now I'll leave that discussion on the legality of the chief administrative officers for another day. But I do have one question for the learned judge. So once the COVID pandemic flattens, and it may never flatten, this is probably the new normal. But if it does, who will execute this judgment? So according to Alexander Hamilton, the judiciary is the weakest and least dangerous of the 3 great branches of government. It poses no real threat to anyone because it has no influence over either the sword or the purse. It can take no active resolution whatsoever. The judiciary has neither force nor will. All it has is merely judgment. It has the law, but it does not have the force of law. So to implement its judgment, the judiciary must rely on the executive, which has the will of the people and the force of the police service. So, and I have to ask this question, will the executor of this judgment be the police service? On order from the CS Ministry of Interior, whom the judiciary has ordered for revetting, yet the position of CAS was created by their boss, the president, after the public did participate in an election, giving him the authority to make executive decisions. Well, I don't know the answer to this, but I'm just asking for a friend.
Judicial mischief.
Telling you when the judiciary goes rogue.
Total. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we have a 3-part criteria that we use to judge the headlines. Are they topical or speculative, repetitive or groundbreaking, thoughtful or just plain lazy? I would say I quite liked the headline of the Daily Nation.
I agree with you.
And I think we should hand it to the Daily Nation.
The winning headline.
Winning headline to the Daily Nation. Onto the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Got a 3-part criteria that we use to assess them: humorous or dry, satirical or pessimistic, and effective or just plain lazy. I'll begin with the Daily Nation.
Okay.
So here we have a caricature of President Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga pushing a wooden horse towards the Parliament building, and on the side of the horse is BBI, and here it would appear that the cartoon plays on the famous Trojan horse story in the Trojan War in Greek history. To suggest that there could be a trap or a trick that Uhuru and Raila will be playing on Kenyans, but also in Parliament. I quite like it.
I do like it. I don't like the negative implication. I would say that BBI is a gift horse, and the apt saying would be, don't look a gift horse in the mouth.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In case it has no teeth. But that's okay. It's a gift horse.
What I will say here is, if you don't control the game, you don't control the outcome.
Yes.
And so for Uhuru and Raila to be giving a gift horse and a Trojan horse, it means they're up to no good.
Yes.
But you know what? For the people, despite the people.
Ah, fantastic.
In spite of them.
Yes.
Fantastic.
All right.
I'll look at the standard.
Yeah.
Gado here has a presidential wooing of sorts. And we have the new Tanzanian president, Samia Suluhu, who's sitting comfortably in a chair, and she's flanked by all the East African presidents offering her goodies and trying to woo her.
Yeah.
You have a caricature of Museveni, and he's wooing her with flowers. Really it's true, it really is funny. Yeah. You have a very well-dressed Kagame, who's trying to woo her with some champagne, or is it wine? Uhuru Kenyatta, with his hand in his pocket, looking very suave and kingly, has a stack of money. And Burundi president, they really gave him a raw deal. Poor guy is standing there. Evariste Ndayishimiye is holding a fish.
Why would Kagame give out champagne to a Muslim lady? Anyway.
Can't ask questions of what she does in her private time.
Yeah, precisely. You never know.
You never
You
know.
just never know.
Just never know. Yeah.
I love it. I think
it's a good contender.
Put in the packing bay?
Yes.
Excellent. The star. You have Ozone. That is caricature of Fuller Chebukati, IBC chair, and he's sitting on an IBC clock. And his legs are far apart, struggling between 2021 and 2022. And the caption there is Chebukati's precarious position. Look, this man, in my view, should have been out a long time ago. And there's a reason why. Basically, I don't like telling people they should have lost their jobs. But if IBC, when was it Bomas of Kenya? And IBC was being, the BBI bill was being discussed at Bomas of Kenya.
Yeah.
IBC put out a tweet saying the Burning Bridges Initiative thing is happening at Bomas, or something of that nature. That to me was not a Freudian slip. That to me was done on purpose. And that was a tweet by IBC. If they had the guts to do that, then they have already showed their side. And therefore, if that is the case, and IBC is meant to be the referee in a referendum and mediator, then it tells you they are already, who knows, probably bought. So the guy should be out by now.
So we toss. Do we toss
Definitely
that one?
toss that one.
Now, whom do we give winning cartoon?
I think we give it to the guy with the fish.
Absolutely. So that gives us, the standard gives us our winning cartoon. Let me also toss these into two papers. And now, our final thought. But before we get there, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit that like button.
And now, our final thought. It is inspired by a book entitled The Empire Project, The Rise and Fall of the British World System by John Dowling.
This book attempts an in-depth study of the rise, fortunes, and fall of the British Empire. But the British Empire was not an empire as we understand the empires of old, but the British system controlled territories through an intricate and extraordinary web of constitutional, diplomatic, political, commercial, and cultural relations. It contained colonies of rule, such as India, settlement colonies, such as America, protectorates, like Kenya, condominia, that's Sudan, and if you do know what condominia was, this is where they have shared dominion over a region, and Egypt and Britain shared dominion over Sudan. Their flags flew side by side. They also had naval and military fortresses like Gibraltar and Malta, occupations like Cyprus, treaty ports and concessions like Hong Kong and Shanghai, and informal colonies of commercial preeminence, Argentina, and finally spheres of interference. I found that very interesting, like Iran and Afghanistan.
How elaborate.
I love it.
Very elaborate.
Yeah.
At the time of its dominance, many found it difficult to label this web of British connections with any precise name. In fact, the author calls it a system. Either way, the British were powerful, and their system could be labeled an empire for two reasons.
Yeah.
The first, the British exerted their presence, whether it's commercial or military, in every world region.
Correct.
Two, the British sought to promote the integration of these geographically separated locations in their control in two ways. The first was through commercial, strategic, and political integration, and the second was through cultural integration, through and by diffusing British beliefs and ideas and cultures. In fact, I hear that Gemma is still struggling with Mutura and their Mokimo, otherwise known as British bangers and mash. As the title of this book suggests, the British Empire was a project resulting from the deliberate and largely self-interested choices of British decision makers. And I think that their project, this project called the British Empire Project, still holds true. Why? Just think about the language we are communicating in now. And as Prof says, he who controls your language of discourse controls your reality. We're still living in the British reality.
Absolutely. I mean, how many countries in the Commonwealth, and they all still report to the Queen?
And even some countries insisted on joining us, such as Rwanda.
No, absolutely, absolutely. You know, it's very interesting to think that Kenya, as we know it now, exists because of British private interests, and not so much so because it was a colonial experiment. And I say this because the impetus behind British commercial activity in Kenya came not from London or Liverpool, but from India. The company that built the Mombasa Ginger Railway was actually based out of Calcutta in India. The company was first known as Mackenzie. Its partners were known as William Mackinnon and George Mackenzie. See, in the 1870s, Mackinnon had tried to lease a stretch of the East African mainland opposite Zanzibar as a bridgehead for a new business empire. Zanzibar was already part of an Indo-Arab trading world, and Indians were well established as merchants and moneyed men on the East African coast. Zanzibar itself had long been considered part of British India's sphere of influence. By the mid-19th century, its merchants had built a commercial system that linked together the huge country between the Zambezi, the Great Lakes, and the Indian Ocean. Mackinnon wanted access to Uganda, but the only way to get to Uganda was on foot. It actually took 3 months to get to Uganda. But what he was mostly afraid of was walking through Maasai and Kikuyu territory. They were always attacked, and they never made it back. So a decision was made to build a railway from Mombasa to Uganda, where 500 Indians were recruited for the job. Mackinnon's scheme was very ambitious and attracted some heavyweight support. Among his directors were some friends, a guy called James Heaton and Lord Aberdare. Among them was also Lord Brassey, the greatest railway contractor those days. Together, they established the British East African Company and got a charter in 1888 from Queen Victoria. With its mainland lease and its right to tax, make treaties, and acquire territory, it seemed the perfect commercial vehicle to carve out an informal empire. But by 1890, the company went broke. So they filed for bankruptcy. And guess what? All the mainland they had leased and territory they had obtained from the charter, they all sold it to the British colonial government for a song, a paltry 250,000 sterling pounds. And that included Kenya and Uganda. 250,000 quid is about 20 million sterling pounds, about 4 billion shillings. Hii watu wana madharau kabisa.
And if you wonder why we are the way we are, it's because you started out as a company.
You started out as a company.
A merger to try and acquire land so that you could plunder.
Maybe just maybe, and I was thinking about it this way. Maybe after 1960, after independence, Kenya should have been not a republic, but an incorporated company.
Kenya Inc.
Kenya
I
Inc.
do like it.
The wars that occasioned the collapse of the British Empire, let me talk about that. So following the cost of two major wars, that is World War I and World War II, the empire collapsed. Under the terms of the concluding Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, the empire reached its greatest peak with the addition of 4.7 million square kilometers and 13 million new subjects. The colonies of Germany and the Ottoman Empire were distributed to the Allied powers, and Britain got control of Palestine, Transjordan, Iraq, parts of Cameroon and Togoland, as well as Tanganyika. But while Great Britain gained more territories, the financial drain caused by the war would prove to be the beginning of the end for the empire. For example, Iraq. In 1921 alone, we're told Iraq would cost Britain 21 million more, million pounds. And that is more than the UK spent on healthcare that year. So the empire was becoming a liability. And Britain needed to invest in rebuilding its defenses, modernizing its military, and so on, in preparation for World War II. And because it was so financially stretched, it didn't manage to. And so come World War II, the war nearly cost Britain everything. So at the start of the war, Britain was still relying on horses in the battlefield, we're told. It had none of the modern tanks and artillery that Germany had gained. And many felt that the war couldn't be won, given the weakened position that Britain was in. In fact, a lot of people in Britain at the time pressured Churchill to sue for peace, including the King of the United Kingdom, who ran away with an American woman. If you do recall, he went off to Germany a few times to try and get Hitler to make peace. So fortunately, Winston Churchill knew that Hitler's offers for a treaty were in bad faith, and he was a grand strategist, and Britain still had one thing going for it as well. They had the soldiers of the entire empire. And so once again, these soldiers from the colonies played a crucial role in contributing to the war effort. Altogether, we're told around 5 million troops were raised in World War II from the colonies and dominions. In World War I, it was about 1/3 of soldiers. So back to World War II. So this time it was America's entry into the war that proved decisive for Britain, and it would be the Americans that would end up in the position of future empire building and even taking over from where Britain had left off. So once again, at war's end, Britain was left with a massive debt and a desperate need for rebuilding itself domestically, rather than maintaining a vast empire. Priorities just changed overnight. Plus, in negotiating post-war terms, we're told, America was in a position to make way bigger demands. And both Roosevelt and President Eisenhower were clear in their disapproval of the British Empire. In fact, FDR is said to have said once, and I quote, "The colonial system means war, and wars, as you know, require gold, require money, which was becoming short in supply." So the exploitation inherent in the colonial system at that time is what oftentimes led to conflict, and that could no longer be sustained. So sure enough, the British Empire began to crumble. In 1947, the jewel of the empire, India, was granted independence. In place of the empire, the Commonwealth was created. As of 2003 or thereabouts, it had 54 members, including Canada, Australia, as well as New Zealand. And in the aftermath of the Second World War, the US emerged, and it still remains, the dominant world power. And as the globalized economy strengthened, new questions about empire building began to emerge. So once again, was a transition at the end of World War II from this great monolithic British Empire to dominance now by the Americans, a former sort of colony of Britain.
Yes, it was.
But one that continues to really dominate our worldview in terms of global politics and other issues.
So just as clumsily as it got together, it fell apart.
It fell apart, yeah. Well, so today we had a winning headline from the Daily Nation and a winning cartoon from the Standard. And I'd like to leave us with a quote for William Ruto and the sufferers of William Ruto. It's a quote from Sun Tzu. He says, "We should recall that tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat." Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're also on your TV screens. We're on GoTV, Pan, and Star Times. Have a good evening.